Hey, what's up guys, OSG here with a new style of video for me. Today I'll be taking a look at 20 Commodore 64 games that got really low scores in Zzap 64, even though they were great games. For anyone who doesn't know what Zzap 64 was, it was the main Commodore 64 magazine over here in the UK. And it's a magazine that a lot of us back then would read and buy or not buy games on the strength of the reviews. That's why this video was so interesting to me, as I would really like to know what some of these reviewers were thinking of at the time, as all of the games on this list scored below 50%, and one of them that only scored 30% is one of the best shoot 'em ups on the system. So I'll be showing each game and a review from Zzap and then picking holes for the reasoning behind such a low score. Okay, that's the explanations over. Let's take a look at 20 games that were unfairly scored by Zzap 64. First up in 20th place is Commando. Yes, you heard it right. Commando, one of the best running guns on the system and the best arcade part out of the 8-bits. In 1988, the budget release of this game was reviewed in issue 44 of Zzap. It's a small review, but the guy absolutely slated the game, saying that it's certainly not one of the best arcade conversions that Chris Butler did. Well, that's just a load of crap. For starters, Chris Butler did a handful of arcade ports on the C64 and this is definitely up there with the likes of Ghosts and Goblins for quality. On top of that, he states it's not good because it only has 5 of the arcade levels. Well, it doesn't, it only has 3. The thing about this review is that in issue 10 of Zzap, the original price game scored 79%. Surely the game now being a third of the price makes it even better. Sorry Zzap, yeah, it only has 3 levels, but it's still one of the best arcade conversions on the C64 and was definitely not only worth the 49% rating you gave it. So much so, Lemon scores this solid 7.9 with 301 votes. Next up in 19th place is Dora. So Dora is a game that I discovered in the Hidden Gems series. It's a basic looking and sounding game, but the gameplay is brilliant once you work out what you're doing, and that's where I think the reviewers got this wrong. Yeah, they both said the game has poor graphics, which it has. One of them said the music is good, which really it's not, and grates on you after a while, but none of them mentioned how good the gameplay is. Instead, they whine on about how the instructions are rubbish. Well, with no instructions at all, I've completed this game, and it's one of the best adventure games in terms of gameplay I've played on the C64. Lemon64 rates this 8.3 with 23 votes, but that's just because it's relatively unknown. It's definitely not worth only 47% that Zzap gave it. 18th place is taken by Test Drive. So this game was reviewed in issue 35 and was a bit of a mixed bag, with 2 out of the 3 reviewers completely slating it. They marked it down for graphics, gameplay and sound, which I think is a complete joke, as this is one of the best 8-bit car simulations ever made. And on top of that, one of the reviewers tries to compare it to Buggy Boy. Yeah mate, totally different kind of game. I mean, the cockpit view on this is brilliant. The controls are tough, but so is driving for real. You can't compare this type of game to an arcade style racer because simply they aren't the same. Yes, the frame rate leaves a lot to be desired, but compared to hard driving, which was very similar, this is brilliant. Anyway, they gave this game a measly 46%, opposed to what the masses say on Lemon64, who gave it a 7.7, which means that Zzap were around 31% out on their rating. Maybe if they gave this game more time and played it as a realistic driving game, then the ratings would have been much better. Solo Flight is in 17th position. Solo Flight is a pretty good flight simulator that was reviewed in issue 91. So let's start with the fact that this game is not actually Solo Fight, but Solo Fight 2nd edition, which was released in 1985. So the comment about lots have changed in the last 6 years is actually 8. And then let's look at the part where they say you have to be a real fan of the genre to like this. Well, flight sims are never really my thing on the C64, but I think this is great, even if it was 8 years after it was released. When you think it's on the Kicks label and it's so cheap, the 42% score is ludicrous. I really think to review games, the reviewers should have a broader mind when it comes to more obscure genres like this one, because this is one great flight sim. Next up in 16th place we have Stringer. Released in 1985 by Addictive Games, this game was also known as Mr. Angry. The game is a pretty straightforward Burger Time type game, which I found to be a lot of fun to play. The review wrote didn't think so, saying long loading times, lack of variety, lack of addictiveness and on until they voted it a measly 42%. Now I do agree with 2 things. Yes, the loading times are a pain and uncalled for due to the basicness of the game, and yes, the price of £6.95 is a little high for what we are getting here, but other than that it's a cool little platform game and certainly worth more than 42%, at least mid 70% for me. In 15th place we have Championship Wrestling. There really weren't many wrestling games on the C64, and I go as far as saying as this is one of the best of them all. Released by the masters of C64 sports games Ellipse in 1986, and then in 1992 on the Kicks label, which is the one we are looking at here, the reviewer said the too complicated controls, uninspired graphics, mediocre sounds ensure that in a very short space of time you'll be wrestling with your C64 to atomic drop kick it out of the nearest window, and gave the game 42% overall. Funny thing is, the original full price review of this game a few years earlier, the reviewers loved the game and scored it 80%. So surely the fact that it's now half the price would be a plus. Just goes to show you can't believe just one person's view on a game. Badlands is in 14th position. Now Badlands was a reskinned version of Super Sprint which added a car battler element to a brilliant game. It was released in 1990 by Doorboy, and I have to say, as far as arcade conversion goes, it's pretty damn good. It was reviewed in the 1990 Christmas special Zzap by 2 reviewers. One said it wasn't bad, but the other one, that was obviously the one who had the last word on the score, hated the game, stating it was outdated rubbish, and also said, which I think is funny, the gameplay is just a matter of steering left and right to negotiate curves and dodge obstacles. Yeah mate, like all car games then. What a stupid thing to say. Anyway, they voted it 41%, which is far too low. I think the only real issue with the original version is the full price of $9.99, but it still didn't warrant the low score. It was actually re-released later on Budget Hit Squad label and re-reviewed and scored 80%. So again, 2 very different scores. In 13th place we have Sable Wolf. So this one is a love or hate game. It was released by Firebird in 1984 for $9.95. Yeah, it's a specky port, and I think that played a big part in the bad reviews it received in the issue 7 edition of Zzap 64. So the thing that all the reviewers said, why do a specky port? And the reason why is, it's a great game on the specky. And for me, I don't mind the graphics, although apparently they are low res. The score they gave of 40% was, to be frank, ludicrous, even if it is a specky port. And apart from the high price, I think it's maybe a 60 or 70% game. Like I say, it's a game that you will either love or hate, but even if you hate it, you can still tell it's more than a 40% game. 12th place is taken by Airborne Ranger. This is maybe the most underscored game on the list, as it's not only a great game, but one of the top 30 Commodore 64 games ever made. The thing about this is, it's a budget title again that has took the hit for the low scores, as the original full price game got 73%, which for me is still a little low, but acceptable. However, the Kicks release in 1992 got a mind-boggling low score of 39%. Now come on, that's a total piss take. He actually mentions the previous score of 73% and saying they must have had the disc version, as the tape version was a disaster. Obviously someone who didn't normally play games from cassettes, as loading times were always long, and turning to side 2 was common. Even with the long loading times at $3.99, this was an absolute gem of a game. Soldier 1 is in 11th position. So where do I start with this one? It's obviously a Beachhead ripoff, but it's not only that, it's a good Beachhead ripoff. I personally love games that have a change in gameplay, and this offers a few different styles which are all pretty entertaining. It's actually one that I sort of agree with a lot of the things that the reviewers say, as it's inferior to Beachhead, and it is overpriced at $9.95 for a cassette and $14.95 for a disc. But even with those 2 massive flaws, it's still worth more than 35%. I'd say it's a 65 to 70% game for me, and if it had been budget, 75 easily. I can only think that these guys weren't really a fan of Beachhead type games, as I like this one. In 10th place we have Mafias Revenge. Okay, I'll start by saying that this game won't be for everyone, but that's why on games like this Zzap should have had more diversity with their reviewers, as management games are a very niche subject and need someone who has a true passion for them to review them. This one is a management game with a difference, as you are managing a mafia family, smuggling drink and taking out the opposition with hitmen etc. The graphics are nice and I love the whole scene drawing for each screen. The reviews however said it was dull, repetitive and only gave it a score of 33%. Like I say, it won't be for everyone, but it's worth more than that crappy score just for the graphics alone, and my score would have been around 70%. 9th place is taken by Turmex. Released in 1987 by Grand Slam, this game was one I had and loved. I never actually read the review back in the day, and I'm glad, as I would have missed out on a great game. The Zzap review said the game was okay looking and played okay in the platform aspect, but the puzzles were too hard. Yeah, they are hard, and yeah, they do require an element of trial and error to complete, but really, if games weren't like that, they would be over in minutes. Another thing that bothers me about the review is that they gave it 15% for sound, with the line feeble in all aspects. Now let's remember, people, that this is the late great Ben Daglish here, and that quote is total blasphemy, as the music is class. Anyway, it scored a criminally low 31%. Ellipse is in 8th position, and this is really the game that inspired this video. This is in my top 5 shoot 'em ups on the C64, and I was astonished to learn when Zzap only scored at 30%. Now where can I start with how wrong this review was? The two reviewers were Ian and Corky, and I have to say that the pair of them are idiots. Ian obviously isn't very good at shoot 'em ups, as I can happily play this for the first 3 levels without one death, so the fact that he says you can't kill enemies on full power is bullshit. Also, what the hell were they talking about with the graphics being crap? They're not. They're on par with Armalite, which is a game that they mention a lot in the review. I really could rant on all day about how mad the reviews made me about this, but it's really not worth the time. 30%, get a grip you morons. In 7th place we have Snow Strike. This is another flight sim that needs some time to appreciate. Yeah, it's not going to blow you away with the arcade action, but as far as flight sims go, it's nice and smooth, looks great for the C64 and does what it needs to stand out from some bad flight sims on the C64. I love the control room scene too. Zzap 64 however didn't feel how I felt and gave this game a low 29%, which is an absolute joke. Okay, it's definitely not the best flight sim on the C64, but it's well above average and not, as they say in the review, the worst out of the lot. If they were to go back and check others in the genre, they wouldn't say that, as believe me, there are some real crap ones. Personally, this is a 70% plus game for me. Maybe they just didn't give it the time they should have. 6th place is taken by Ninja. I have actually mentioned this game and the crap score I got in Zzap in my best C64 budget games video. This is one of my all time favourite C64 games and it holds a lot of nostalgia for me. Yeah, the game is simple, but times were simple back then and we were only kids, so simple was good. The reviewers in Zzap didn't try to hide their hatred for Ninja games, and one of them said this is the worst excuse for a karate game they had ever seen. Well, that's just utter crap. Even with this game's flaws, and it does have some, it's an absolute bargain at $2.99, and I can remember buying it and loving it even if it was easy, which is more than I can say for some games that Zzap scored much higher than the 25% that they gave this. It's also not just me that thinks this either, as this is one of the most mentioned games in the comments on the best budget games video. Adventure Construction Set is in 5th position. A game for the more creative kids here, but sadly not one that I played as a kid, as it's a disc only game due to having to save your work. That being said, I played it through emulation, and for when it was released this is very innovative, and I would have loved to have had this as a kid with a great imagination and plenty of time on my hands. The White Wizard was a reviewer in Zzap, and I'm guessing that he was an age when your childish imagination has matured somewhat, and games like this are hard to get into, as he did not like it at all. While anyone who did play it as a kid will tell you that this is one quality piece of software where you can let your imagination run wild. Oh, the White Wizard gave this 24%. However, Lemon scored a massive 8.4 out of 10 from normal people who have played the game. You make the decision who to believe. In 4th place we have Set Willy II. This was, and still is, one of the best known titles on the 8-bits. This is an old and very dated platform game that still plays great today. It was released by Software Projects in 1985, 1 year after the first game, which Zzap scored 63%, which is weird as it was full of bugs and in my opinion inferior to the second game. They scored Set Willy II a ridiculously low 24% in issue 4 of the magazine, mainly focusing on how much it was like the Spectrum game, which to be honest isn't a bad thing, as both games are classics on that platform. I know back then Spectrum ports annoyed a lot of C64 fans, but 24% is a joke. The game was re-reviewed as a budget release in issue 46 and was a little bit slated again, but ultimately given the score of 63%, which I think is more fair. Third place is taken by Doorboy. So Doorboy is a weird one because it is indeed not a great game by any standards. But this list isn't about great games, it's about scores that were so far off the mark they were unbelievable. The review says it's dated. Yes, it is. It says that the sound is poor. Agreed, yes, it's not the best. And they also say it's virtually unplayable. I do disagree with that, as after a few goes you start to get the hang of it. They also say, and this is the most truthful thing of all, the price is too high, which to be honest that is a piss take, but to only score this game 18% is stupid, because it virtually gives you nowhere to go when you see a really bad, really unplayable game on the system. Sure, it's no 70% plus game, but it's definitely in the 50 to 60% bracket for me, maybe higher if it wasn't so damn expensive. Moon Shuttle is in second position. Originally released in 1983 by Datasoft, this is a really early game. Obviously Zzap wasn't around back then, and this was reviewed in 1986 in issue 15 in the Budget Bonanza section with the slogan, "Do you get value for your money?" Well, in this game for $2.99 I would say you do get value for your money. They really went to town on this game, saying it was a truly awful shoot 'em up, but although I never played it back then, I have for the sake of this video, and I'd have been happy with the cash outlay for this. Yeah, it's no catechus, but really for 1983 this game was pretty good, and it was definitely better than the stupid score that they gave it of 13%. They even scored the abomination known as 1943 higher than this, which if you play them back to back, this one is much better. And now, in first place we have Rogue. So I'll start off by saying that this is what really bothers me about some reviewers sometimes. I can only think that one of the reviewers hadn't even played the game before writing it, as they refer to this game as a Gauntlet clone. That to me said they had probably seen screenshots only, as this is anything but a Gauntlet clone. It's an adventure RPG, and one that is held in high regards by lovers of the genre. I truly don't think the guys who reviewed it gave it the time it needs to see how good this was, or they were expecting something else and got a genre that they weren't accustomed to or liked. On that note, this was scored a lower than low 10% when really it's a 75% plus game in most lovers of the genre's eyes. Okay, that's it for this video. It's been fun reading through old Zzaps, even if I didn't agree with what some of the reviewers said. I do plan to do a flip version of this in the future, concentrating on times when Zzap overinflated scores which resulted in people buying games that were a total letdown. Let me know in the comments below if you know of any games that Zzap got wrong, and if you haven't already, please drop this video a like and subscribe to my channel for more great retro content. Also, if you can, please support me on Patreon like these folks going up the screen right now. I hate asking, but it really does help me in creating content, especially when they take a little longer like this one with all the research. Anyway, enough e-begging. This is OSG signing out.